Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, January the 21st, 2026. Today, the Sun and Mercury are conjunct, exactly conjunct. Indeed, it is a Cazimi conjunction. And in this video, I want to spend some time looking at this conjunction and, what does it mean for a planet to be Cazimi conjunction? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And I'm not particularly sure one way or another, but I tend to think that Mercury is rather burnt up when it is exactly conjunct the Sun. But before I go into real detail about the Sun Cazimi conjunction with Mercury, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today. So here is the chart of today, set for noon New York time on Wednesday, January the 21st. And the moon is now in Pisces, or at least it's edging into Pisces. So, where is it? So the moon is at 5 degrees 31 Pisces, New York time. So that does mean that we have a change. What kind of change? Well, moon has been in Aquarius. There have been loads of planets in Aquarius, and now the moon is leaving that sign, and so perhaps things aren't quite so intense, and perhaps it's easier for us to sort of be ourselves, and at least in an emotional sense. And there may also be some more bit more sort of flexibility. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe, if appropriate. So as far as Pisces is concerned, it's a mutable sign, and Aquarius is a fixed sign. So with the moon moving out of Aquarius, it's just perhaps more variability. And from an emotional point of view, we can sort of have a better understanding of what is going on, and additionally the moon is just getting further away from the sun. So the moon is, no longer in the same sign as the sun. So, that kind of gives the moon a breather. And the moon is moving towards a conjunction of the North Node. And I think the North Node moon conjunction is probably quite fortunate. When we look at the North Node, we should perhaps regard the North Node as being akin to Jupiter, in the same way that we regard the South Node as being akin to Saturn. And so, there is a right way of doing things, and I think it sort of tends towards the emotional rather than the analytical, even though we've got a load of planets in Aquarius, and we might think that Aquarius is a very analytical sign. Now, the moon, just before it moves into Pisces, perhaps right at the beginning of the day, does make a square to Uranus. So, if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, then you might pick up on that Moon-Uranus square. I think that if you're in the Americas, I don't think that is going to be a particularly major issue. And so, by the way, the moon goes into Pisces at 6:50 a.m. London time. So, that means that if you are in the Americas, Western Europe, certainly perhaps Europe in general, the moon is pretty much in Pisces all day. If you're in Asia, Australasia, well, it is a different picture, but I'll be coming on to the chart for Australia, in a moment. Now, the main thing happening today, is a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. You see that the Sun and Mercury have both gone into Aquarius, and they're forming a conjunction. And there's always this issue when the Sun is exactly conjunct Mercury about whether or not it's a good thing. And, I've titled this video, Mercury Cazimi, I kind of wanted to title it Mercury Combust. I mean, Mercury has been combust the sun for a long time, and the definition of combustion is when the sun and Mercury, the sun and another planet are within 8 degrees. You could say that combustion really is important, when they're both in the same sign. So you could argue that, but when how does it go? When Mercury was right at the end of Aquarius and Sun had just gone into, when Mercury was right at the end of Capricorn and Sun had just gone into Aquarius, that Sun and Mercury were not combust. I think it's difficult to argue that, but then they were in different signs. They were in, perhaps different zones, different areas, and so I think the combustions are weakened when you've got two planets in different signs, even if they are technically very close together. So now they are close together and they are combust, and so this is a question: is it a good thing or a bad thing? And I'm going to talk about that question, later in the video with a few examples. And so, because there is this theory that if two planets are really close, if a sun is really close to another planet, somehow that other planet sort of benefits. But that is something I will be referring to. Additionally, this Sun-Mercury conjunction takes place on a minor fixed star. I think it's minor, called Albireo, which I believe is the second brightest star in the constellation of Cygnus, which is a swan. And as far as what it means, it doesn't get a lot of coverage, Albireo, but that Vivian Robson, in his book the fixed stars and the fixed stars and constellations in astrology, he does say a little bit about Albireo, and he says about Albireo, he says it's in the Beta Cygni, which I believe means the second brightest star in the constellation of Cygnus. He says a topaz yellow and sapphire blue binary or double star situated on the head of the swan. I think it's sometimes called the beak of the swan, symbolized as the song of the dying swan. Influence of the nature of Venus and Mercury. It gives a handsome appearance, neatness, a lovable disposition, and beneficence in despair. So, according to Robson, you think about the song of the dying swan. That there is a sense of despair there. That things are bad, but chin up. Worse things can happen. You kind of think of passengers on the deck of the Titanic. I mean, not the ones who are panicking, but the ones who are just they accept the situation. You could say the band on the Titanic, being sort of beneficent, wishing everyone the best, helping other people onto the lifeboats, maybe, but not going onto the lifeboats yourself. And so there may be a sense of tragedy here with this, with Sun conjunct Mercury conjunct on Albireo. But Albireo is quite a minor star, and so maybe Swan's one-liner maybe Robson's one-liner about the song of the dying swan should not be taken too seriously. So that's the picture for New York. If we set the chart for Sydney, Australia at noon, the moon is at 26 degrees Aquarius. So that's what I meant about moon square Uranus. The moon in late Aquarius square Uranus. It is perhaps a time of a certain amount of instability. I mean, moon square Uranus, something has to give, something doesn't want to give. Moon and Uranus are both in fixed signs, holding firmly onto something, and perhaps some people being sort of too opinionated for their own good. But finding compromise with moon square Uranus, can be hard work. But it doesn't last long, this moon square Uranus. And so if you are in Australia, you'll find that over the next over the last part of the day, the moon will move out of Aquarius and move into Pisces. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, and Mercury is now in Aquarius, both heliocentrically and geocentrically. So there's Mercury at 1 degree Aquarius, moving towards a conjunction of Pluto. So we're kind of seeing heliocentrically what we already know geocentrically. So arguably that doesn't really tell us anything we don't know. Mercury is making a sextile to Neptune. It's making a sextile geocentrically as well. So I don't think there's a great deal to report there, though we do have Mercury opposition the Earth. So that gives us, or rather puts, the Cazimi conjunction of Mercury geocentrically in a different light. It presents the same information, but in a different way. So if you have got the Earth opposition Mercury, so think about what that actually means. It means that you've got the Sun obviously in the middle of the solar system, and you have got the Earth and Mercury on either side of the Sun. So you could then say that the Earth, us down here on this planet, we are totally estranged from the Mercury principle because the Sun is in the middle. We can't see it. We have no awareness that Mercury exists right now, whatever astronomical devices we're using. And so if Mercury is rationality and being able to think things through, you could argue that with Mercury opposition the Earth, with the Sun right in the middle, what chance have we got? Many of us may not be thinking rationally, and that's perhaps what we're seeing around us, what people are doing, what Trump is doing, perhaps what Trump is doing, but maybe Trump is the rational one. I don't know. This Greenland thing. I'm trying to be logical about Greenland, but no one seems to agree with me. I can really see the logic of what Trump is doing. Doesn't mean to say that what he's doing is right, but maybe I'm just being a Gemini. I'm just being contrary. So that's a heliocentric picture. I don't think there's a great deal to report because really what the heliocentric chart is doing is kind of telling us what we already know. And Mercury, by the way, is of course is trine Uranus, and of course geocentrically that would mean that Mercury has just finished making a trine to Uranus geocentrically. So it's just telling us what we already know, but it's perhaps making it just that much more poignant. So now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, January the 21st, 2026. Aries, you may sometimes find it difficult to know exactly what is happening. And part of the problem might be that information might be being denied to you. You'd expect people to be open and honest, to tell you what's on their mind, but they're finding it difficult. And it's not because they're necessarily being deliberately deceptive. Just the truth. The truth is hard to find, and the truth is difficult to articulate. And so even if you trust someone, even if someone has, treated you well in the past and they've been honest with you in the past, getting to the truth might at the moment be difficult, and that shouldn't bother you. Once you accept the situation, then you can move on, and perhaps also accept that it's down to you to make things happen. Doing things in your own quiet way, without feeling that there is a huge amount of pressure. And perhaps when we're thinking about honesty and revelation, and if you feel that the truth is hard to find, it can work both ways. You yourself, Aries, should perhaps be keeping things secret. Maybe you may have a lot of ideas, there are things you want to do, but is it really worth your effort? It just might not be worth your effort. Just some things just should be left as they are, and things will get more exciting at a later stage. So I think that the easy way to handle today, Wednesday, is probably to do what is important for you. And there are things that are important. Mars is really in late Capricorn now. It really, really is in late Capricorn. At noon New York time, it's 28 degrees 42 for sign. So in just a couple of days, on Friday, Mars will be in Aquarius, and Mars is really very well placed in Capricorn. It is strong. It is a time when you can accomplish a great deal, and you can accomplish a great deal with or without anyone else's help. So, in the last part of the week, just do what you have to do what you feel is necessary. And, if you don't get help, or if you don't get the kind of support you're looking for, it just doesn't matter. So, that is probably the right approach, and just not to feel pressurized, especially while the moon is in Pisces, and certainly that is the easy approach. Having said all that, I think it is possible that you might think that it is a time when you really need to get attention. You need to understand what is happening, and you need to perhaps understand the truth. Now, as I've just said, finding out what's going on is hard work. It's probably a waste of time. But if it's really important to you, if you absolutely feel that you need answers, then Aries, you have the ability to escalate. You have the ability to escalate very, very quickly, and in the process, you might alienate yourself. You can certainly upset people, but you will get noticed. You can get noticed, and you can certainly, if you want to, speak with power and conviction, and you might in the end get the answers you're looking for. But there is a price, and the question is, Aries, do you really want to pay the price? And I think in most cases, the answer is probably no. So it just might be best, however impatient you feel, Aries, to just leave things as they are, and take the view that things will resolve. And don't forget that today the Sun is exactly conjunct Mercury, and because of that conjunction, things might just be a bit stuck. And I'm kind of giving a game away here, of course. There's this. I've talked about this question about, is the Sun exactly conjunct Mercury a good thing or a bad thing? I think on balance it is a bad thing. I don't buy the Cazimi theory, that the fact that somehow Mercury is boosted when it's super close to the Sun. I don't buy that, and I just think that with the Sun conjunct Mercury, things are just rather too single-pointed, and there could just be a certain obsession, and it's probably best to wait a few days, maybe even until sort of early next week, until things have got easier. Then if it's something you're looking for, something you need to get hold of, then I think you will be able to find what you are looking for. Taurus. We go back to this question about whether or not the Sun Cazimi Mercury is fortunate or not. And it's a question I periodically talk about in these videos. And, is it good for you? Or is it a situation where you just might not know what's going on, and you might just be, utterly confused? Well, I think the Sun-Mercury conjunction may not be such a bad thing. If you just look at it from a Taurean perspective. So, being a Taurus, you're capable of being, very focused and very stubborn. And, once you decide you want something, you just want to give it everything. And, you do not want to be distracted. So the Sun-Mercury conjunction in Taurus, which is, reasonably close to Venus. Remember, we've got Venus quite close to Pluto. Venus had its Pluto conjunction to Pluto a couple of days ago. We've now got the Sun making a conjunction to Mercury. So it is quite powerful, and the Sun-Mercury conjunction, it's going to be helpful provided you're not distracted, provided you decide what is important and you just give it your entire focus. So if you can do that, I believe the Sun-Mercury conjunction can help you. It can really allow you to get things done and to concentrate on the things that matter. Where the Sun-Mercury conjunction could be a problem is if you get distracted. If you try to do two things at once. If you do try to do two things at once, or more, 3, 4 things at once, then I think it could be a real negative, and you may end up in a situation where you simply can't see the wood for the trees. And in particular, you have to be very careful about who you listen to. It may be the case that the people who know you best are perhaps the people who should avoid you. They're the people you should be avoiding, because those that know you very well, perhaps your family, they can get under your skin, and you have to pay them attention, and you pay them attention, and then you're trying to think about something else, and you end up not knowing what's going on, and you get distracted to the point where you could make mistakes. And I think that ideally you would make some effort to keep a distance from your family, and perhaps from your home as well. Just family and domestic issues just may not help. That's not what it's about. And I think that today you need to think about the future. You need to think about what you want to do, and you want as few things on your plate as possible. And ideally, you should be devoting today to just one thing. If you try to do more than one thing, you could make mistakes. Though, having said that, there is a conjunction between the moon in Pisces and the conjunction to the moon in Pisces and the North Node. So if you know someone relatively well, not super well, but if you know them relatively well, perhaps a friend or an acquaintance, then you're able to give them some space. But you have to look at the flow. You don't want to be in a situation where anyone is telling you what to do or what to think. You can listen to other people's complaints to some extent. You can listen to other people's worries. Some people are worried. They've got things that are bothering them. You can certainly do that, but you don't want to get dragged in. And so, being there for someone with that moon conjunct the North Node, perhaps being sort of emotionally there for them without giving anything away. I mean, that is the key point, and without being distracted. So you've got to make sure that you keep in mind your priorities, and you keep in mind that number one priority, which is whatever it is you're working on, whatever it is that is important to you, you've got to do that. But I just think that there could be some opportunity to give space to other people, but don't give anyone too much space. Because if you have a situation where you spend the day involved in social activities, you spend a lot of time thinking about what this person wants, that person wants, then yeah, it's another reason why you might just get completely confused and not have a clue what's going on. A lot of people don't know what's going on, and you can observe their confusion and their chaos, but you don't want to become part of it, because once you become part of it, you just might get yourself in a somewhat intractable mess. So yeah, keeping some distance really is some important there, but is important, but you don't want to necessarily be totally cold and detached. Though Venus is in Aquarius, Venus is your ruler. So again, bear in mind what is important, and just see what's left over. And if you've got some spare energy, then giving it to other people, spending some time with other people might be okay. But you've just got to make sure that you don't allow yourself to be swamped by the surrounding confusion and chaos, because it is a confusing day for many people, and there's no reason for you to be part of this confusion. Gemini, this Cazimi conjunction between the Sun and Mercury is important. Mercury, your ruler, is exactly conjunct the Sun, and there is this question, to what extent do you benefit from this? Because in traditional astrology, the Sun Cazimi conjunction is supposed to be fortunate. Mercury, it kind of gets weaker and weaker and weaker as it moves towards the conjunction of the Sun. But when it makes that exact conjunction, there's a moment where things suddenly come together. It's rather like that concept of things breaking up, things going all over the place, and then suddenly they become clear. Maybe it's kind of like that separate reality. I think Castaneda wrote this book called Separate Reality, which I think it was the second one after the teachings of Don Juan. And separate reality might be about things really completely breaking up as one moves into some kind of drug-induced confusion, and everything is all over the place, and then suddenly at some stage things snap together, and things are very different, completely different, but they're the same. And that might be how this Sun-Mercury conjunction works. Perhaps that's how it has been feeling for some Geminis, and suddenly you're there. It's real. This is the real world, but it's a separate reality. It's not the same. Everything is heightened, and that might be the experience of the Sun-Mercury conjunction when it is exact. And so if you have those kind of insights, sorry, I'm not talking about drug-induced insights here, I'm just talking about just the insights of everything being sort of hyper-real. So if you have those insights, then hold on to them, because you are seeing the truth of the matter for what it really is. And so that is certainly a positive way of looking at the Sun-Mercury Cazimi conjunction. But everything is suddenly on the same wavelength for you. And this Sun-Mercury conjunction is in Aquarius, and Aquarius is a sign that, from a Gemini perspective, does have a spirituality to it. It can look at things on a new and enhanced level, and perhaps you're looking at things which have a permanence. They're not just temporary. They're not things that are just going to die in the fullness of time. And perhaps you're getting to the real heart of the matter. And of course, that's what Cazimi means. I think that the word Cazimi, I mean, it's a sort of, I think it's a Latinized version of an Arabic term, which means something like in the heart. And so you can get to the heart of the matter with this Sun-Mercury conjunction in the heart. There might be a real spirituality to it, and you understand what it's all about. But it may not just be about spirituality. It's about this whole sort of Aquarian time that we're in. It's of course not the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius doesn't start for a very long time. I think the age of Aquarius starts, is it AD 2379, something like that? I mean, according to one view, there is another view, but it starts centuries later from AD 2379. But it's just that we have a lot of planets in Aquarius right now, and you're aware that things are different, and you can become part of the change, but you just don't want to be completely overwhelmed by it. And perhaps, Gemini, you shouldn't be asking too many questions. That could be the problem. So with Sun-Mercury, you see the truth for what it is. It's right in front of you. But being a Gemini, there's just a danger that you ask questions. You ask this question, that question. You ask too many questions, and in the end, you just completely lose touch with everything, and you're in a state of chaos. And Gemini, that is not what you want. That's not where you want to go. So be careful with this Sun-Mercury conjunction. But if you handle it in the right way, I think that you can benefit from you, and it can give you insights. And on a slightly different note, Gemini, I think at the moment you're very able to project yourself. We've got a conjunction between the Moon and the North Node in Pisces, and I've talked about some of the spiritual and philosophical aspects of today, but there's also a material dimension to today, and I think that many Geminis will have a good sense of what it's all about, where they're going, what they need to do. And so if you have ambitions, then now might be the time to really get going on them. And in the process, I think that you are going to be quite effective in a social sense. I think that you'll know how to communicate. You'll know how to present yourself in the best possible light, and I think you'll come over as someone who is quite attractive. That you really have got something to offer, and people will find you interesting. Of course, Geminis like to hear that, don't they? Of course, me having my sun in Gemini, I've got to say something good about my own sign, haven't I? But yeah, it looks overall to being quite a powerful Wednesday. There are some pitfalls. You don't want to ask too many questions. To an extent, you should need to take things at face value and make that transition. Things break up. You go through the confusion. You go through the asteroid belt as things break down, and then things can become crystal clear, and you can understand pretty much everything. Cancer. We have the moon changing sign. The moon is moving out of Aquarius, and it's moving into Pisces. And I think that from a Cancerian perspective, having the moon going into Pisces is something that you should be happy about. The moon moving into a water sign. With all those planets in Aquarius, it just could have been a bit too intense. Aquarius, is a fixed sign, and it just may have been at times just difficult to completely be yourself, and it might have been, you felt that you were in a somewhat alien environment, and part of what you're experiencing is just a change from one stage to another stage. Inevitably, the world is changing, and that certainly can't be helped. But now that the moon is moving into Pisces, Cancer, you're feeling better. Now the moon makes a conjunction to the North Node in Pisces, and so that adds to the power of it. And so the question is, how should you respond to that? I think that it's important that you don't take things too seriously. With all these planets in Aquarius, it might have felt that things were intense, things were complicated. You may have been inclined to make things more complicated than they actually were, and you perhaps didn't want to take risks. But now that the moon is moving into Pisces, just things feel easier. And of course, when the moon moves into Pisces, it makes a mutual reception with Jupiter, and that's critical. Moon and Jupiter are in each other's signs. And so you just feel better about yourself, and you're reminded of the fact that Jupiter is in Cancer. Jupiter is in your sign. It might be retrograde, but it's exalted in Cancer. The moon is now starting to make a trine to Jupiter. Okay, it doesn't make the trine today, but I think it makes the trine tomorrow. So that makes you feel good about yourself and your direction and your broad angle on life. I mean, Cancerians tend to have a particular view of life. They have strong opinions. They usually have strong opinions, and things are being confirmed. And if you're looking for validation today, I think that you can find it, and you just know how to look at things from the highest possible level, and you're unlikely to be distracted by things that are trivial and pointless. You can move beyond all that. And so, overall, today feels good. You've got freedom, you've got space, you've got emotional space, and I think really that's all there is to say. Leo. The Sun is, of course, your ruler, and the Sun is making a conjunction to Mercury, an exact conjunction to Mercury, a Cazimi conjunction to Mercury. And that means that the Sun very much gains some of the qualities of Mercury. Now, there is this question about the Sun-Mercury Cazimi conjunction, about whether or not it's a good thing, because one thinking, well, the Sun is, overwhelming Mercury. But then you are the Sun. Sun rules Leo. And so if the Sun is conjunct Mercury, then you just might be in a position to benefit from Mercury, and, you are able to, express yourself freely. There's something quite mercurial about today, and you can say what's on your mind. You can communicate. You can communicate whatever it is you're thinking about. And this Sun-Mercury conjunction is in Aquarius, your opposite sign. So it might be the case that there is a lot to say, a lot you want to say, but also remember that communication is a two-way process, and there is some danger with Sun conjunct Mercury that you discount what other people are saying. You're not fully listening. You may even have the capacity to shut people up, and I don't think that would be a good thing. So whatever you're doing today, get the balance right. You might have a lot to say, but you've got a lot to listen to. There's a lot to hear, and you can benefit from what people are saying, because you are being given a different view. And also, there's simply a question of respect. You've got to respect other people, accept that their view is potentially just as important as your view, and yeah, you might learn from it, but perhaps people need to be heard, for their own good. If people are being ignored, well, they're not going to be happy about it, and that's not going to do you much good. And while this is going on, you have to think about what the sun is doing. And if you look at the position of the sun, it's still on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and it's not just on the Venus-Mars midpoint. It's on the Mars-Pluto midpoint as well. So if you look at the sun, there's the sun. You've got Mars on one side of it, and you've got a Venus-Pluto conjunction on the other side of it. So it's very much picking up on those three planets. And with those two midpoints, Sun conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint, Sun conjunct the Mars-Pluto midpoint, that certainly means that you can express yourself with considerable power and force, no doubt about that. And that can be good. Obviously, you want to be heard, you want to be listened to, but as I've already said, you mustn't be too forceful, you mustn't be too obsessed with yourself, because if that were to happen, you would start to have a really quite negative impact on other people. And while I think intrinsically today you are someone who is appealing, charismatic, all the usual Sun conjunct Venus on Venus-Mars midpoint stuff, there's just a slight possibility that you overplay your hand. You try too hard to get noticed, and in the process you could put people off. That needn't happen, it shouldn't happen, but I'm just saying that there's some possibility that it might happen. And so Leo, overall, certainly be aware of your power and enjoy your power and utilize it, where appropriate, but just don't overdo it, and do have some understanding of other people and other people's needs, and also recognize that there could be times over the course of the day when you need to take a step back, listen to what other people have to say, and perhaps in certain cases follow their lead. Maybe they've got something to contribute, and you do need to give them a chance. Virgo, this conjunction between the Sun and Mercury is important. That's the headline aspect in this video, and Mercury is of course your ruler. So with your planet exactly conjunct the Sun, how are you going to experience it? I think there's some possibility it could be problematic, and I'm thinking that there may be certain things that you could get involved with today that might well be overwhelming. They just might be just too much. And perhaps, Virgo, you need to recognize that you've got some power, but you haven't got all the power in the world. And it is possible that if things get too much, if you won't be able to fully express yourself. And also do think about your health. I think I talked about your health in my video for yesterday, but it is a time to be looking after your body, and the message continues. And it's a time perhaps to be looking after your body, not just your body, but your mind and your spiritual health in a defensive way. There may be things which you come across today which could undermine you. Now, those things might be just the atmosphere, surrounded by lots of different people, lots of different pressures. It could be that you think it's important to eat something, and you're inclined to eat something that isn't necessarily good for you, or you go somewhere where there's pollutants or dust, smoke, whatever. So do think about that. Think about what could undermine you, and things. I'm not saying, by the way, that things are going to undermine you, but I just think that you could just make an assumption. If you're wondering whether or not something is good for you, then do err on the side of caution, particularly if you're giving in to pressure. You're giving in to pressure to do something for someone, go somewhere, or even to eat something. Don't necessarily do it. You've got to look after yourself, and you've got to make sure that throughout the day you're able to think clearly, and you don't want sort of emotions to cut in and just find yourself doing something without really thinking about what you're doing, and then you make a mistake, or you get drawn into an area that just basically not good for you. So that means, Virgo, that today it's really very important that you're in control, that things happen according to your plan. You don't really want surprises. You want things to happen in an orderly way, and you just don't want to leave things to chance. Now, I talked about other people, and other people sometimes are difficult to avoid, particularly now that the moon is moving into Pisces. So moon is in Pisces. It is your opposite sign. It's making a conjunction to the North Node. So with the moon conjunct North Node in Pisces, there is a place for other people in your life, for giving them some attention, accepting that they need space as well as you need space, and seeing what they have to say. But you just don't have to be drawn in. You can be polite, and you can be warm, and you can be friendly without necessarily giving anything away. And in fact, it might be easier today if someone else takes the strain. If someone wants to do something, if someone wants to take the lead, wants to come up with the ideas, well, maybe you should just let them get on with it. If they're feeling confident, fine, but you don't necessarily have to be involved. So you give people permission to act, but you don't necessarily get involved with what they're doing, because you have to think about your own energy reserves, and if you take on too much, well, you're going to exhaust yourself. But I'm not saying it is going to happen. I'm just saying it could happen. And I think part of this, it does relate to the fact that the Sun and Mercury, are conjunct. And okay, there is a view that the Sun-Mercury conjunction is completely fortunate. It might be in certain cases, but I just think that in this case, you just have to make sure that you are in control, because if you lose control, if things are happening that you don't really understand, well, it's not going to be great, and you could end up exhausting yourself. But I don't think that need happen. Libra, there is still this Aquarius emphasis, and we just had Venus conjunct Pluto. I mean, Venus is now moving away from Pluto. In fact, Venus has really managed to sort of get away from the pack. So you had Venus being under really quite a lot of pressure over the last few weeks. It had to make us. It was making a sort of a conjunction to Mars, and it was making a conjunction to the Sun, and it just had a conjunction to Pluto. So you might have felt that you were moving from one thing to another, and it just could have been hard work. But now Venus has broken free. Venus is very much the lead planet, and it's now 2 degrees away from Pluto. So what is there now, Libra, to be holding you back? You've done the difficult bit, and now arguably you can claim the rewards. And what are the rewards? I mean, part of those rewards are about being able to act freely, and doing the things that you would like to do, and you don't have to worry too much about what other people are doing. In fact, you should not be worrying what other people are doing. That is important. I mean, in fact, if you have a day which is, heavily sociable, where you're doing lots of different things, or rather meeting lots of different people. Well, I don't think that's necessarily going to be a good thing. Other people have the capacity to be very confusing. Why are they being confusing? Because they don't know what's going on. And if they don't know what's going on, then you could end up not knowing what's going on yourself. But if you hold firm, if you do the things that are important to you, and you act in a way that is fairly independent, then I think you're going to really have a great day when you can really savor your freedom. So what you don't want to do is sort of give away your freedom now that you've just gained it, and in the process. You want to make sure that everything is clear, is in order. It is a potentially a chaotic time, for all of us, regardless of our sign. But I think that you have a chance now to create some order. I mean, not in a way that is sort of completely material. I'm not necessarily talking about you sort of picking things up or anything like that. It's kind of creating emotional order, and an order that can exist within the chaos. Because if you try to structure everything in a very material way, you want everything exactly right, everything measured properly. Well, then you're asking for trouble, because you're creating a system that can't deal with change. So what you have to do is create some systems for yourself, perhaps a set of routines or some way of living your life, which can be buffeted by the tide. It can deal with a bit of instability, and I think it needn't be so difficult. And so what you're trying to do is, you're trying to make things simple, and once you've made things simple and it's all in front of you, you understand what's happening, and at the same time you're doing something which really is important to you. You shouldn't worry too much about other people's ideas, and because I think in many respects, other people could be worse than useless. Their input just may not be welcome. So once you can break free, and you are breaking free, I think that you can really savor the many opportunities coming your way. Scorpio. It's probably a good thing that the moon is leaving Aquarius and entering Pisces, because there were just too many planets in Aquarius. We had Sun, Mercury, Pluto, Venus. It's all just getting too much, and of course Mars is about to move into Aquarius. But now that the moon has broken out and has changed sign, it just, for you, Scorpio, it makes things easier. It makes you somewhat less intense. You could be just focusing on things that are important to you, focusing on, I don't know, your own material, regarding all of that as being really important, and not wanting to compromise anything, and perhaps regarding everything as potentially being a threat. But you can take that too far. And now that the moon is moving into Pisces, there is just greater flexibility, and there's more room to move, there's more room to breathe, and in a way there's more room to swim, in a sort of metaphorical sense. I'm not suggesting you go swimming. That is probably a bad idea. But with the moon in Pisces, from an emotional perspective, I think you are becoming sort of less rigid, and when you lose your rigidity, then you also become quite creative. You can start to think about what you want to do, how you want to do it, and think about think about what you enjoy. The moon is you're not just in Pisces, but it's making a conjunction to the North Node. So it's important, Scorpio, that you don't take yourself too seriously, and perhaps you have been taking yourself too seriously. And so with the Moon conjunct the North Node, I think you perhaps have an opportunity to sort of lighten up and to make the most of everything, and to be able to also tune into your sort of natural Scorpio emotions, because Scorpio is, of course, a very emotional sign in a good way. Now, does that mean that today you're going to be completely passive? I don't think so. I think that okay, you could be passive, you could just do what you enjoy in a sort of natural, spontaneous way, but there may be at times it may be just a feeling that things aren't necessarily going anywhere. It might feel that sometimes things are a bit stuck, or perhaps they've got a bit boring. Now, if you want to up the pace, if you want to increase the temperature, you certainly can. I think that right now Scorpios are able to communicate with really incredible power, and it might be to do with the fact that the Sun is conjunct Mercury. Is Mercury weakened by the Sun, or is it strengthened by the Sun? I think you could argue that the Sun represents what you want, your desires, and so if the Sun is conjunct Mercury, you can be very clear what you want. People will understand. So although I think it should be a more relaxed day from yesterday, if there's something you want, something you need, if you, for one reason or another, demand people's attention, I think you can very much get this attention. And if you are in that kind of situation, it's important that you stick to one thing. So if you're trying to argue something, don't use lots of different arguments. Don't sort of go all over the place. Just stick to one argument, stick to one way of looking at things. And if you can do that, Scorpio, I think that people really will pay attention to you. You'll get noticed, and I think in most cases you'll be able to get your way. I mean, Scorpios will usually get their way if it's important, and so I think today isn't an exception. So by and large, Scorpio looks like a good day. I think it's a day when you can have fun, when you can relax if need be, but you can also be powerful, and you can get favourable attention. And if you want people to do things in a particular way, then I think you should succeed. Sagittarius, you are feeling the impact perhaps of the moon changing sign. So the moon has been in Aquarius, and now it's moving into Pisces. And when I've been talking about Sagittarius, over the last few days, I have I've been perhaps a bit non-committal, and I have been telling Sagittarius that maybe things aren't necessarily as clear as they should be, and you have wanted answers. I mean, to an extent, I think you've been able to get some answers, particularly with these planets in Aquarius, but it hasn't been sort of entirely satisfactory. And now we've got the moon moving into Pisces. Now, the thing about the moon moving into Pisces is that when the moon moves into Pisces, it's in mutual reception to Jupiter. So the moon and Jupiter are in each other's signs, and so moon going into Pisces gives you some certainty. Pisces is a sign that is very important for the average Sagittarius, because it is mutable, and it does at the same time give you security, and so you have a great sense of who you are, which doesn't necessarily have to be explained. Now, with all these planets in Aquarius, there might have been quite a lot of talking, trying to understand, trying to explain, and you might have felt you were getting some answers, but it wasn't entirely what you were looking for. But if you're looking for something, perhaps you'll now realize that what you were looking for was actually right in front of you, that you don't have to go anywhere to find it. It's there. It's there for you. And so, with the moon moving into Pisces, moon conjunct the North Node, then I think Sagittarius, there is not a great deal that you have to do. I mean, or rather, there's not a great many places you have to go to. Indeed, the place where you might feel most comfortable and perhaps be most lucky, might be your own home. When you're at home, things feel good. Things feel straightforward. You feel connected, and perhaps the home or places that you're familiar. This is where things make most sense. The further you go from the things you know and the things you understand, the more complicated things become, and that's absolutely not what you want. And also, when you're on home ground, when you're on familiar territory, that is going to be when you're on best form in a social sense. So when you understand what's going on, you're going to be effective socially. And so, if you're meeting people, meet them on familiar ground. Meet them in places where you know the rules, where you understand the rules, and in that way you can come over as being someone who is quite confident. You might come over as being quite extroverted. I don't think you necessarily feel particularly extroverted, but that is the best way of channeling your Sagittarius energy. There's certainly no need to go further afield, or to certainly you shouldn't be going somewhere you've never been to before, or you shouldn't be playing with ideas and concepts that are unfamiliar to you. In fact, the more familiar something is, the more it will work for you. Capricorn. Mars is the last planet in your sign. And it's still there. Mars is around 29 degrees Capricorn. And that means you've got maybe a couple of days to make the most of it. And Mars, of course, is exalted in Capricorn. It's trine Uranus. So Capricorn, if there is something that you're trying to get together, and perhaps it's worked so far, so it's going well, but you maybe need to see it through, then maybe you should make sure that you proceed with a certain degree of haste, because on Friday, 2 days time, Mars moves into Aquarius, and that might be a time when you feel that an opportunity has gone. Of course, it's not the case that an opportunity has gone, but I'm just urging you to, over the next couple of days, to really make the most of things, to really try to sort of see things through to a successful conclusion. And ideally that would be today, Wednesday, or tomorrow, Thursday. And and I say haste, but I don't want you to be too hasty. I mean, Saturn is still conjunct the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And, I've talked about Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, over the last few days. I think it is potentially quite a dangerous aspect. Saturn sextile Mars, Saturn sextile Uranus, and Mars-Uranus as a pair can be quite dangerous. So Capricorn, don't be too physical. Don't use force, but instead, use the Capricorn approach. Slowly moving towards your goal. And if you keep going, if you keep going over a prolonged period of time, you don't have breaks and you just keep going, then again, I'm confident that over the next couple of days that you're going to be able to accomplish a great deal. Now, you may not have all the facts. There may be things you don't know. You thought you knew them, but you don't. And now you have an opportunity to ask questions, and to come to some answers. Some things you don't understand, and perhaps you felt that not everyone was being forthcoming, but you can come to the right conclusions, and you can get the information you're looking for. And the question then is, how do you get this information? Well, you're subtle. I think if you ask a direct question to someone's face, well, they might not give you what you're looking for. On the other hand, if you work behind the scenes and you use your emotions and you use your subtlety and your sensitivity, then I think Capricorn, you can just create a situation where the facts are available, and it's also possible that you're just told things by accident, or you accidentally come across what you're looking for, and so you can really increase your knowledge, perhaps of an important matter, over the next few days. And with that knowledge, you'll have an even better chance, of being successful in terms of whatever it is that your wider goals are. Now, if you want to force the pace, yes, you can. Absolutely, you can force the pace. But the question is, do you really want to? And is it worth it? And with Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, that is powerful. It allows you to smash into things. But the trouble is that when you start smashing into things, well, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the end results are going to be, and so it's just much better if you take a kind of a roundabout approach. Aquarius. There is a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury today, and this conjunction takes place right at the beginning of the sign, and it could well be that this Sun-Mercury conjunction is about your power and what you are able to do. And I think that you will have a strong sense of who you are and what can be accomplished, especially as we've got other planets in Aquarius: Sun, Mercury, Venus, Pluto, and of course it's the beginning of the Aquarius season, and you might be still getting used to the fact that the Sun is in Aquarius. And of course, if you're reading this from a perspective of your Sun sign, because I know that some people come at it from the view of their ascendant rising sign, or even perhaps their moon sign. But if you're coming from it from the perspective of your sun sign, it's soon going to be your birthday, and especially if you've got your birthday, over the next few days, this Sun Mercury conjunction, really does matter. And I think the Sun Mercury conjunction is probably going to be fortunate, because your ideas and the way you project yourself, they're all aligned, and so you're aligned very well to the situation, and what you say is who you are, and people understand you, people get it, they know what you're about, and you can indeed have a very powerful impact. And so perhaps that is the way it should be. I mean, you can have an overly powerful impact. As I was telling Capricorn, Saturn is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and that means because Saturn is sextile Mars, it's sextile Uranus, and that applies to you because Saturn is your ruler. So with Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, you can force things through if need be. But the question is, do you want to? And it just may be that just by being yourself, you just get your way without there being too much pressure, too much drama. It just all sort of naturally comes together. And so that is one aspect of today. You're certainly in a pretty strong position. Though, don't forget about practical matters. The moon has left Aquarius. It's gone into Pisces. It's making a conjunction to the North Node, and with that conjunction between the moon and the North Node, there are things that are important to you that need to be resolved. perhaps they are quite material. There may be a financial side to things, and I think that if you pay attention to money and you look at what's going on in a financial sense, you'll start to understand things. You don't necessarily need to just look at the facts of a matter. You just understand the way things are just unfolding, and it becomes clear. And if you make an effort to look at numbers, to look at statements, spreadsheets, may not be what you want to do, but if you look at that kind of thing, it will start to come together. It will start to make sense, and that can really help you, bring your life together. I mean, that's because you can't just be all about action, all about moving forward. You have to think about the cost of things, and I think right now you're going to be quite good at tuning into the cost and actually being able to just instinctively know how things are going to turn out in a financial sense. So there is another dimension to the day, perhaps more boring, more material, but it shouldn't necessarily be discounted. Pisces, the moon is moving into your sign. Okay, somewhat depends, where you are. Moon moves into Pisces at 6:50 a.m. London time, so much earlier in the day, maybe even late on Tuesday if you're in California, for example. So if you're in Europe and the Americas, the moon is in Pisces, pretty early. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, it won't be until later in the day that the moon moves out of Aquarius and into Pisces. But looking at the moon moving into Pisces, moving into your sign, that's good news. I think this Aquarius emphasis, because we've had all these planets in Aquarius, and I think that it might have just got to be just too much of a good thing, and it might have been difficult for you to just be fully yourself, and you might instead have been thinking about maybe the emotional side of things, or you might have been sort of confused and things didn't make sense, and you couldn't fully apply yourself to the matter, whatever the matter might be. But now that the moon is in Pisces, I think that things are clearer. You're feeling better about yourself, and also, when the moon moves into Pisces, it makes a mutual reception to Jupiter. Jupiter is, of course, your ruling planet. Moon and Jupiter, moon in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer. They are in each other's signs because the Jupiter rules Pisces and the moon rules Cancer. And tomorrow, moon will make a trine to Jupiter. Today, the moon will make a conjunction to the North Node. So you have a clear sense of who you are and what you want, and it's okay to put yourself first, and no one's going to mind. And additionally, your ability to get on with people is really going to be very good. Perhaps in the recent past you felt that it might have been difficult, but now it's just becoming more straightforward, and you can be quite active in how you reach out. So if you want to present yourself socially, I think you can do it very effectively, however you want to do it, however it's face to face or via some kind of message. You're able to forge new connections. So that's certainly a good thing. And so Pisces, I'm quite confident about today. Now, as far as close relationships are concerned, well, as I said, I think that your social skills are pretty good right now. But there is a conjunction between Mercury and the Sun, and so Mercury conjunct the Sun. Well, the Sun is burning Mercury up. Okay, or is it a Cazimi? There are two ways of looking at it. I'm inclined to think that some of the people close to you may really be feeling that conjunction to the Sun, Mercury conjunct the Sun, and they may feel that they're dealing with things which are quite heavy, which do prevent them from sort of fully expressing themselves. So it's not an entirely easy aspect, this Mercury-Sun conjunction. And it's not your problem directly. And it just may say something about how other people are expressing themselves or not expressing themselves. And if you feel that people are being silent and are not being forthcoming, well, it's probably to do with that Mercury conjunct Sun. And rather than just ask them questions or to try to get answers out of them, try to work out what it might be that is bothering them. I mean, and so be subtle in that sort of Piscean way. And in the end, I think that people will be more forthcoming. I'm thinking particularly of the people close to you. But I think as far as people in general are concerned, then I think that as far as people in general are concerned, I think that things do look good. I think that you are able to come over as someone quite dynamic, and you certainly get noticed, and if you know how to present yourself in a way which is forceful but which at the same time isn't overbearing. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and now it's time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 2, which is the receptive. Now, the thing about this hexagram is it doesn't move. We've got no moving lines. And that means when you've got the receptive with no moving lines, the nuclear hexagram is also the receptive. And so this hexagram, the receptive, is pure negativity. It's pure yin. And it really is kind of super powerful because it's not moving. There is no movement. I mean, it's pure response. And this just may say something about our day. This day, ideally, should be a day where nothing goes on. I've mentioned the fact that we've got Mercury Cazimi. When Mercury, the Sun is exactly conjunct Mercury, and it's almost as if everything just collapses in on itself. That there should be no action. Now, some of us might feel that we should take action. There's a lot going on, and we think, well, with all these planets moving into Aquarius, Aquarius is a positive sign, an action-orientated sign, at least compared with Capricorn. But no, this is really telling us that what we should be doing today, Wednesday, is just observe. And it's not a time for taking any form of initiative. We might think we're wonderful. We might think that we've got that creative spark, but no, it's not there. We're kidding ourselves. And this hexagram is quite passive. And I know that doesn't sound great, but we can't be active all the time. And maybe we should be watching other people take the initiative. Yeah, let them take the risks. Because we just don't know where it's all heading. I mean, it's easy to jump to conclusions, and this might say something about how we evaluate the news. I mean, there's a lot going on in the news, always something going on. And particularly now we've got Greenland and all sorts of things to worry about. Getting a feeling that we have to react, that we have to do something. Because if we don't take the initiative, then we might get just run over. But no. It's just the receptive, and that's really all there is to say. So if you've got anything, if you're planning on doing anything dramatic today, then probably don't do it. If you see something dramatic, that's interesting. You don't have to respond. You don't have to come up with your own material. Sure, you can have ideas, but if you actually put these ideas into action, you might be very disappointed with the response. And it just could be a time when those that take the initiative are those that fall flat on their face, or fall flat on their faces. So just bear that in mind. It's very straightforward. It's kind of easy to me, but do nothing. And that's my broad advice as far as today is concerned. Of course, it depends on the situation. Sometimes we have to respond. I mean, it may be an emergency. We've got to do something. But again, we're responding. We're not bringing anything new to the table. And I think that is the important point. So I want to finish by looking at Mercury Cazimi. So Cazimi means in the heart of something. And I think it initially sort of comes from the Arabic, and it was Latinized with this term Cazimi. And so Cazimi means that a planet is very, very close to the sun. And for example, 17 arc minutes. I mean, I think that's William Lilly in his Christian Astrology suggests 17 arc minutes. There are different views about how close things should be. And so here is the conjunction between the Sun and Mercury, and so it takes place. I make it at 3:49 p.m. London time, so it'll be in the morning in the Americas, late in the evening, or into tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And so this conjunction takes place at 1 degree 37 minutes Aquarius. And as I said at the beginning, this conjunction is on the fixed star Albireo, which is Beta Cygni, the second brightest, I believe that's the second brightest star in the constellation of Cygnus. And Robson talks about it as the song of the dying swan. I don't know how you feel about that. And it might just be about the end of an era. Maybe that's how we feel about it. Something is over. And we can be magnanimous about it, and we can be good-natured, but there's still a sense of sadness, a sense that something is departing. And this Sun-Mercury conjunction, it's Cazimi, and traditionally, if a planet is Cazimi, it's strengthened. So you could say Mercury is strengthened by its proximity to the Sun. It's made stronger. It's made clearer. It has clarity. And is that the case? Well, the Sun. You could argue that the Sun is the villain here, because the Sun is causing the problems, and it's not just any Sun; it's a Sun in Aquarius. What we sometimes forget with the Sun in Aquarius is in its detriment. I know that we're supposed to think all of the 12 signs are equal, but if you look at things from a Sun sign perspective, from a mathematical, traditional Sun sign perspective, the best sign of the 12 is Leo, because Leo is in its own, Sun is in its own sign in Leo. The second best sign is Aries, because the Sun is exalted in Aries. And the worst sign for the Sun to be in is Libra, because the Sun is in the worst sign is actually Aquarius, because the Sun is debilitated. It's in its detriment in Aquarius. The second worst is Libra, because the Sun is fallen in Libra. And I'm not saying that is the case. I'm not being mean to your Sun sign. Librans can be incredibly successful, and so can Aquarians. So don't worry about that. But in terms of this chart, maybe the fact that the Sun is debilitated because it's in its detriment, that may really be undermining Mercury, and a lot of us can't think straight. Not just us. You think about what people in government and in power are having to deal with. They can't think straight. They don't know what's going on, and so it's difficult to have clarity. And I think that I really do think that we're seeing this. So that is certainly one way of looking at the Sun-Mercury conjunction. Now, is it all bad? Well, it's still Cazimi. We have to think about what Cazimi might mean in a positive way. So maybe we have a choice here. So if we can be single-minded, not be distracted, really focus on the things that are important, maybe Mercury can benefit. Because, the Sun and Mercury are together. And so maybe Mercury is strengthened by that Sun after all. But we just don't want to have any confusion. We want to be able to have a real sense of single focus. So that if we want to have any chance of using this Sun-Mercury conjunction in a positive way. And one thing about the Sun-Mercury conjunction, which I did talk about yesterday, is its proximity to the Saturn-Uranus, to the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020. So Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020 on December 21st, 2020, was at 0 degrees 29 Aquarius. And so it's kind of interesting that you've had all this Greenland thing and, with NATO almost sort of fracturing or on the verge of fracturing while the Sun and Mercury have been on or crossing the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which happened over 5 years ago. That Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is still very much with us, and it's just telling us about the overall Jupiter-Saturn cycle, and it's telling us that we need to start really thinking about the new. When the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happened, okay, it was in the middle of COVID. Perhaps some of us hadn't really understood what it was really about, but now it is really starting to manifest. And it will manifest more and more. Over the summer, we've got the Jupiter-Saturn square. Jupiter in Cancer will be square. Saturn. Jupiter. I think that Jupiter. Sorry, not the Jupiter-Saturn square. Jupiter-Saturn trine. Let me get it right. Jupiter in Aries will actually be trine Jupiter. Sorry, Saturn in Aries will be trine Jupiter in Leo. So we've got that over the summer. So there may be a more benign manifestation of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction later on in the year. But right now we're perhaps seeing the negatives, and we're seeing the real potential of this, and perhaps the damage it can cause. And so this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, this chart, I've set it for London, and it's all pretty grim in London. I mean, Starmer just moves from embarrassment to embarrassment, and there's a lot in it. If you've been following the UK news, Starmer gave away the Chagos Islands, or is in the process of giving away the Chagos Islands, and it's costing the British taxpayer an absolute fortune, and it was probably completely unnecessary. And Starmer's going on and on about international law, and Trump said it was a mistake. And I think Trump has said that one of the reasons he's going into Greenland is because of Britain and the Chagos Islands. I'm not quite sure about the logic of that, but I'm sure there is a logic somewhere. So that is the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, set for London. If you set the chart for Washington, this is the 2020 conjunction set for Washington. Jupiter and Saturn are Washington D.C. It's square the ascendant, so it's really saying something about perhaps government. I know that Jupiter and Saturn conjunction are not on the midheaven, but they are sort of square the ascendant above the horizon, so they do have there is a 10th house feel to that. Also, Pluto is kind of on the midheaven. For that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, again, set for Washington D.C. If we set the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction for Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, I've used the equal house system here, I think, yes, because if we use the Placidus house system, because it's far north, it can really sort of break down. But the ascendant for that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is 13 degrees 10 Cancer. Of course, 13 degrees 10 Cancer is the degree of the United States' sun. So perhaps this idea of Greenland being transferred to the US one way or another was sort of intrinsic there in the chart for that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction set for the capital of Greenland. And so yeah, so you can see this Sun-Mercury conjunction is just triggering the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which took place over 5 years ago. By the way, this is a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction 2020 set for Kiev, with Uranus, the planet of disruption, revolution, perhaps war in certain senses, being on the midheaven if you do set the chart for Kiev. So, I think that is why perhaps this Sun-Mercury Cazimi conjunction is feeling so disruptive at the moment. It's because it triggered that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which took place over 5 years ago, and now we're starting to see what that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is all about. It's perhaps all says something about government in the United States, how Trump is behaving. It says something about Greenland, with the degree of America's sun on its ascendant. We know that Britain is going from bad to worse, and Uranus is on the midheaven in Kiev. So it's all coming together, perhaps not coming together in a very fortunate way. And very quickly, I just wanted to think about the Sun Cazimi Mercury in the past. Just look at a few events that took place when Sun was exactly conjunct Mercury. And to ask this question, is it fortunate or not? And I don't want to look at very many events. In fact, I just want to look at three. So one recent event was the Bayesian. Remember that really expensive yacht that was moored outside Palermo Harbour in Italy that sort of got destroyed by a storm. People were killed. And it got a lot of attention. I think it was because it was a multimillionaire who was owned it, and I think his family were impacted. And so at the time of the Bayesian, there was an exact Sun-Mercury conjunction. That's as Cazimi as it can get. That looks fortunate, doesn't it? Her Sun and Mercury were just 1 degree apart. Of course, it didn't help that the Sun-Mercury conjunction was square Uranus. And another event, which I talk about rather too much, but just a reminder that the San Marino Grand Prix in 1994 took place with a Sun-Mercury conjunction, Cazimi conjunction. Roland Ratzenberger, the racing car driver, was killed at the time of a Sun-Mercury conjunction. So, it's looking good, isn't it? Sun-Mercury conjunction. Now, what about electional astrology? You might think that a Sun-Mercury conjunction is so good, if it's Cazimi, that you want to have it in a chart. Really? Really? Is that such a good idea? Now, we have an example of an elected chart, a chart chosen by astrologers that has Sun-Mercury conjunction, a Sun-Mercury Cazimi conjunction. And this is the foundation of Myanmar. Now, Myanmar, which used to be Burma, I think the general consensus is that Burma has been a complete disaster as a country since its independence from Britain. It had a go at democracy, it just didn't work. It's ruled by the generals. It's been ruled by generals for ages. It's sort of a civil war. It's sort of part of a sort of the Golden Triangle, the drug trade. It's just a disaster as a country. It's one of the most disastrous countries in the world, and its horoscope, its independence, was chosen by astrologers. Of course, they were not using Western astrology. I don't know precisely what type of astrology was used. I'm assuming that it was something fairly similar to Vedic astrology. I don't know. I should know perhaps. But if you look at the foundation of Burma, you look at Sun and Mercury, there is an absolutely exact Sun-Mercury conjunction there. and in Capricorn. So Sun at 12 degrees 27 Capricorn, conjunct Mercury at 12 degrees 39. So Burma is an example of what happens if you found a project with a Cazimi with a Cazimi Mercury, and as we know, it's a disaster. And I just wonder what they were thinking. I mean, I'm thinking with this chart that they probably thought that the Sun-Mercury conjunction was fortunate. I would think, because it's so close, it's that you can imagine how it might have been chosen. And Jupiter, I assume they're using a sidereal zodiac, so Jupiter perhaps would have been in Scorpio, but would have been in the first house, so maybe that sort of looked good. But really, I think that this chart, the foundation of Myanmar, I think really kind of lays to rest this idea that a Cazimi Mercury is a good thing. I think Cazimi Mercury should be avoided. I think by and large it's very difficult. It's just Mercury's combust, but it's super combust, and perhaps further evidence. Look at what's happening in the world. So anyway, that's all I've got to say on the subject for the moment. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you would like it. If you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.